So today what I'm going to be talking about is Cordova plus PhoneGap equals love. Well, maybe not love, but at least it's a marriage. All right, so this is me, and I don't just put up this slide here because I look great in that purple shirt. It's because I'm super vain. No, what it actually is so that if you need to get a hold of me, that's my Twitter handle. Please use that to ask me any questions after the talks. I'd love to hear from you. So one of the things I get asked literally every time I do a talk on PhoneGap and Cordova is what is the difference between the two of them? So quickly, who here has used Apache Cordova or PhoneGap? I know we have a red hat guy here. He's going to have to. You're not going to put up your hand? You know you've used it. Your platform is built on top of it. There we go. I had to shame him into throwing up his hand. All right. So a long time ago, like 2010, there was a project called PhoneGap by a company called Nitobi out of Vancouver, BC. Now, Nitobi is a very small lifestyle company, and they came up with this idea of using the UI web view and a JavaScript bridge to be able to write applications with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so they were going along using it for some client projects and just generally making a living on it. When Adobe came along and backed up a truck full of money to them, just dumped it on their front lawn, and they said, okay, yeah, I guess we're going to have to sell. So when they sold, Adobe got the rights to the PhoneGap name, the trademark. So at that point in time, I was working at IBM, along with Pat Mueller over there. I know he's trying to hide. And we were part of a group at IBM that was helping the guys at Nitobi bring PhoneGap to the 1.0 release. So part of this whole purchase, we got all of the code for PhoneGap donated to the Apache Foundation so it would remain open source, which was great because then companies like Red Hat and Ionic and everybody else could continue to use it without having to worry that Adobe was going to come in and shut it down someday. So the way that I like to think of it is now Apache Cordova is like the Linux kernel, and things like PhoneGap and Red Hat's offering and Ionic's offering are different distributions of Linux. So just kind of, if that question ever comes up again, just kind of think of it that way. The great thing is, if you do Cordova work or PhoneGap work or Ionic work, it's all interoperable. It doesn't really matter what you're using. Just pick the best tool for you. I'm not trying to sell you on any kind of PhoneGap stuff. Now, we're here to talk about mobile web, and I really love where the mobile web is going right now. In fact, I'm really excited about a lot of the stuff in progressive web apps. And in fact, if you go all the way back, and here's a great quote that I love from Brian LaRue, is that the original purpose of PhoneGap was to someday cease to exist. Okay? What we're doing is taking the W3C APIs and polyfilling them into the mobile browsers so that you could start to write the most up-to-date applications. And at some point in time, the PhoneGap Cordova shell would just fall off the end, and you'd be left with what is now kind of like a progressive web app. Sadly, the W3C could never really make up their minds on a lot of APIs, so we're stuck supporting a lot of APIs that don't even exist under their umbrella anymore. But, you know, I'm really excited about progressive web apps and kind of the direction that that's taking us. So now I have a little bit of background about PhoneGap and Cordova. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about things that are new in PhoneGap these days. So this is a little app that I was working on, and it's basically because I'm getting old and my memory is starting to kind of get really bad. So I started taking pictures at conferences so I can remember what was going on. So I'm just going to take a picture of some of you right now. All right, let's see if I can actually do this with the... Sorry, I basically have found out that this cable is the one that gives me like 55% success rates. So, all right, we took a quick picture. I'm going to do enhance. Let's see, let's put you guys on high def, make you look better. Yeah, we don't need to undo any of that. We'll say, yep, we're all good. And there we go. All right, we have a picture. So next, I think the thing I want to do is just go ahead and share this out to the internet by tweeting it. All right, so go ahead, tweet that. So hopefully that'll show up on my Twitter feed there. So now you're probably asking yourself, why did he just do all that? Is he like wasting time because he doesn't have enough content to fill the 20 minutes that he's supposed to do? Yes, that's exactly why I did that. But also because we have a lot of new plugins. Boy, have we got a lot of new plugins. The first one is I've been working with the Creative SDK team at Adobe to bring their functionality for Android and iOS into hybrid applications. And what you just saw there where I did the enhancement was the image editor component itself. So now you can kind of use that kind of advanced image editing components in your hybrid applications. As well, if you're working with anything in Creative Cloud, there's a single sign-on component. And so now we have a plugin that allows you to do that. And finally, we have this new plugin called Send to Desktop. And what it allows you to do is if you're working with image files on your mobile device, you can just send it directly to your desktop. Now, let's see if that actually works. So I'm going to go ahead and just click the desktop button here. And there we go.
Those are valuable.
So what actually just happened there was the image on my device was sent up to the Adobe Creative Cloud. It figured out where the hell I was in the world, sent it back down, and opened Photoshop for me so I could actually go ahead and edit this. So what I'd probably do is like switch those exit signs from green to red. I mean, why do you have green exit signs? That is wrong. That is just so wrong. All right, anyway, it's neither here nor there. So yeah, we've done a lot of things with the Creative SDK plugins. Things that are coming up next, we're looking at adding CocoaPod support. So Creative SDK has released on November 2nd. After that, they're starting to work on CocoaPods, which is great because the Creative SDK is a 400 megabyte monster. And being able to deploy it as a CocoaPod is going to make life a hell of a lot easier. As well, I've been working on an asset browser component so that anything that you have stored in the Creative Cloud, you'll be able to get access to it in your hybrid application and download it. Or there's also a headless upload component as well. And then we're going to take all of those plugins and put them in the PhoneGap developer app. And I'll talk more about the PhoneGap developer app later. Also, we have a push plugin. So the push plugin, it doesn't matter if you're on Android or iOS, you have the same API so that you can register with GCM or APNS or whatever the Windows acronym is these days. I always forget. But basically, we give you a consistent API so you can do that. And we've recently added support for Android N and iOS 10. So one of the things that I wanted to show you is an example of a push. So if we go back over here, you can see right now that the application has blue. But I've already prepared this file here where I've changed the theme to green. And with a little bit of luck, which I never seem to have, I'm going to send this content sync push. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a push to the device. I'm going to give it a URL of what file I want it to download and apply to the application. And I'm saying content available is 1. So basically I want to run this in the background. So it won't really matter that the app isn't up on the screen right now. So let me go back over here. All right. So if I send that, basically at this point in time, we have it's completely headless, so there's nothing to tell the user that a push notification has come in. But in the background, the application should be working on downloading and applying that new content. So the next thing I'm going to do is send an actual push notification, which has some data in it, and it's like, okay, so now we've told the user that the app is updated and we can go get the new content. So let's click on that, and it didn't get applied. So epic fail. Great stuff. I swear it worked in post. Basically, what I was trying to show you there is that by using a silent push notification, you can tell your application that there is new content to go fetch. And just the same way that service workers have the fetch command now, we have a plugin called Content Sync, which allows you to go get that data as well. So anyway, the push plugin unlocks a lot of capabilities that you're able to use in your application. As well, we've added in what's called browser push. So when you're creating a Cordova application, you can add Android, iOS, Windows, all of your different platforms. We also have the browser platform, and that's for you to be able to develop your application mostly in the browser. And as you know, Chrome and Firefox now support push APIs. So what we're going to do is have it so that you can start developing your application, and it will ask you if you're going to allow notifications to come in. And then from there, once things are all set up, you can actually send a push notification to your browser. So what this allows you to do is to test all of your application code without having to go through the trouble of creating a GCM project or, God forbid, the Apple certification and capabilities and all the other mobile provisioning stuff that goes along with that, or even paying the $99 Apple tax. So you can actually test this stuff just by creating a Cordova project or a PhoneGap project, adding the push plugin, and using the PhoneGap command line to do a push. So what's coming next in the push plugin? Once 1.9 is going to be CocoaPod support. So for GCM on iOS, we're including the libraries directly in. We're going to move to CocoaPods for that. It's going to make life a lot easier. That's also going to require a release of Cordova iOS 4.3, which is coming pretty soon. And then 2.0, all bets are off. I may break some of the API, but Firebase Cloud Messaging support, which is what Google has moved to for everything now. So as I talked about the PhoneGap developer app, which we're going to be adding the Creative Cloud SDK plugins into it, we've added a couple of new things to it as well. The barcode scanner, which is a super popular plugin. I know, like Pat is laughing. Like Pat had you and I worked. Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's like forever ago. I did the Android side and Pat did the iOS side, and it's just people love that thing for some crazy reason. It's code that we're not proud of, but people use it. So what are you going to do? As well, we've added the social sharing plugin as well. So what you saw when I hit the share button on the app that I showed you earlier, and I tweeted out that image, that was using the social sharing plugin. And that's by a guy named Eddie Verboegen, and he's from just outside of Amsterdam, and he writes a ton of plugins, and without Eddie, I don't think we'd have half of the functionality in Cordova, so I really have to give him a hat tip there. So a lot of our users, amazingly enough, are on Windows, which always shocked me because you can't develop for iOS on Windows. But a ton of them are, and what we added was the PhoneGap developer app, PhoneGap desktop app, which is just a graphical UI, and it's basically just calling shell commands. So if you need to create an application or start an application or anything, it's just a graphical user interface on top of it. But we're looking at ways to make it better and better all the time. One of the things that we're doing is having the auto update support. I don't know how many people here develop Electron apps, how much fun that is on Windows to get it to automatically update. Anyway, and also we're adding in template support. I'm going to talk about templates in the Cordova section later. We're also looking at adding embedded workflows. A lot of people come to us now, they already have a native application, they want to enhance it by adding Cordova PhoneGap stuff into there. So we've actually documented right now the process to embed a Cordova web view into your existing application, but we're working on ways to make this a hell of a lot easier. We have basically an Android Studio plugin right now, which will allow you to do that. It'll automate a lot of those steps for you, and we're working on the iOS side as well. Some of the new features in Xcode 8, people are like laughing, like, oh, we're doing that too. Okay, never mind. All right, so a race to the finish. To you, sir. All right. Anyway, we're going to make that a lot easier for you to have a native app and add Cordova content into it. And finally, Cordova decoupling. So PhoneGap and Cordova, they're breaking up, but it's okay. Don't feel bad about them, because what happens right now is when you install the PhoneGap command line, it actually installs a pinned version of the PhoneGap CLI along with it. That's a horrible idea. I don't know why we've been doing that for so many years. So going forward, you'll be able to install the PhoneGap command line and the Cordova command line independently and control which you're going to be using in your package.json. So that way, if you have a project where this person is using PhoneGap 6.2 and this person is using 6.4, there may be some incompatibilities because of the way things work. Well, no, you can put that all in package.json now. You're all using the same versions. You're not dependent upon which pinned version of Cordova is underneath the hood there as well. So breaking up, but it's a good thing. So getting along to Apache Cordova, what's new in there? So we've got improved template support, which supports package.json, which I just talked about. When you're creating a new template, the way that it looks right now is you create a package.json, and that's the point that it's going to be published up to NPM. And you give it your index.js, anything that you need to run when you publish it. And everything else goes inside a template source. And the next package.json that's in there is one that you would default when you create a new application. So if you create a new Cordova application, you get all of this stuff. Everything above that is just required in order to get it into NPM. And template discoverability, we have some keywords that you can put into your package.json to make sure that when people search for templates, they can find it. And of course, you can use the template repo as a reference as a good starting point. So using templates is pretty stupidly easy. Once you find a template that you want to use, you just do Cordova create my app -- template and give it the name of the template on npm that you want to use, or you can directly use a GitHub URL. So what we've noticed is a lot of companies do some kind of white labeling of applications, and if they have a single template that they can use for creating conference applications, that is a great boon to them, that they can automate a lot of these steps by just using a template. All right. If you want to learn anything more about templates, you can take a look at the Cordova documentation for that. So Cordova create is splitting out of Cordova lib. So right now those two things are very tightly coupled. We're decoupling that. It's going to make it a lot easier for if you want to create a new Cordova application that you can automate it using Node instead of having to use the Cordova command line. So instead of you writing a Node script that shells out to the command line, which calls a Cordova command, just use the Cordova create library. As well, we're splitting Cordova fetch out of Cordova lib. So that's kind of fun because right now we're using a .cordova directory in your home directory to cache everything. Again, that's kind of dumb. I don't know why we've lived with that for so long because we're just installing it of npm. We should be using npm's cache. So we're switching over to using npm's cache itself. And so right now, if you want to use it, all you have to do is use the -- fetch at the end of any command when you're creating or when you're adding a new plugin or if you're adding a new platform. So you can use this kind of experimental feature now. And we've created Cordova nightlies so that anything that you want to use, you can use the bleeding edge. I know this makes my life a heck of a lot easier than having to do a whole bunch of esoteric commands to kind of get the latest stuff. I can just pin to the nightly and I'll get the last stuff that everybody was working on. And if you want to, just do npm install Cordova nightly. And of course, I talked about earlier, basic CocoaPod support. When iOS 4.3 comes out, CocoaPod support will be in there. It's pretty simple to use. Just in your plugin, you would use the framework tag, and you would just give it the type of pod spec. And then you'll be able to install any CocoaPod from out there. The way that it does it is it's going to check your machine if you have CocoaPods installed. If you don't, it'll crash and burn horribly, or maybe warn you that you should go install CocoaPods. It's one of the two. And then it will run pod install to do all the downloading of dependencies, and that's great because that's going to handle any kind of issue that we have right now where if you have like a Google Plus plugin and you have the push plugin and you have a maps plugin and they're all using the same Google libraries. Right now, that'll fail horribly because you'll try to include them more than once, but the CocoaPod dependency managers will take care of that. And again, you can try that right now with Cordova Nightly, but before I got on the plane today, we had 2 to 3 votes to release Cordova iOS, so it should be out either in the next day or so. So, we're adding Cordova dependencies to package.json. Anybody that's used a PhoneGap or Cordova project at this point in time is probably aware of config XML. That's based on a horribly old widget specification, and we're moving away from that, moving to package.json, like npm, all of the things. So, yeah. Thanks, Carlos. Oh yeah, there's Carlos over there. Carlos also worked at IBM on the PhoneGap Cordova project as well. So anyway, what you'll be able to do is instead of listing all of your plugins and platforms in package.json, or sorry, in config XML, you'll be able to put them in package.json. Your life will be a lot easier. You'll be sticking with the tools that you're used to. So your dependency, like I said, can be a platform, a plugin, or even the version of the CLI. And that's a real key thing. If in your package.json, you can say, we're using this version of the CLI so that all people in the project are using the same version, you're not going to get any inconsistencies. And then, of course, if you use the --save, it's going to fetch the best version from npm for your project. So we're going to be able to say, like, if you're using Cordova 6.2, that only supports up to this plugin version 1.5. But if you're using 6.4, oh, you can use the new 2.0 version. So you're never going to get into a situation where you're completely broken because you have an older version of the CLI. It'll pick the right plugin version for you. So what's coming up next? In Cordova 7? Yeah, 7. It's crazy. Fetch will become the default, so we'll get rid of the -- fetch. It's no longer experimental, it'll be by default. Will be browserify by default. And save and restore is moving over to package.json. So edit config XML into package.json. And we really want to better document what it takes in order to create a new platform. So if you're coming along and you have the latest new piece of hardware that runs JavaScript and it has a web view and you want to add a Cordova project, we're going to document the hell out of that so you can just take it and run with it and not have to get the core team as much involved. So to ramp things completely up, we've got over 60 Git repos in Apache Cordova. You can find all of them there as well. They're all mirrored on GitHub as well. We would love more contributors, and it's like super easy to become a contributor to the Cordova project. All you need to do is to sign a CLA, and this contributor licensing agreement is just to indemnify anybody who's using Cordova. Basically, it says, yes, I give this code of my own free will, and nobody else has copyrights on it, so you're giving those copyrights to Apache so that nobody can sue any company using it. It's a really quick process. We would love more people to help out, whether it's maintaining some of the plugins we have, working on the core platforms, or even just writing documentation, because that is the thing that all open source project needs, are better documentation. Okay, cool. All right, thanks all.